There's something very few people say out loud about money. You can spend your entire life building it, saving, buying a home, investing, working hard. But at some point, things start to move in the opposite direction. Your wealth stops growing like it used to. In fact, it slowly starts to decline. And what's interesting is, most people don't even realize it's happening. They think, maybe it's just age. Maybe it's just retirement. But after years of observing, I realized the issue isn't age. It's how we built our financial system from the very beginning. Main idea 1. Feeling like you're getting richer is sometimes just an illusion. I've noticed something really interesting. A lot of people in their middle years feel like they're making great financial progress. Their accounts are bigger than before, their net worth looks higher on paper, and they believe, I'm on the right track. But here's the interesting part, that feeling doesn't always reflect reality. Most people don't realize that there are certain types of assets that make you look wealthier, but don't actually make your life easier. A very simple example, you buy a house. You make monthly payments. After 10 to 15 years, you look back and think, wow, my net worth has grown a lot. And that's true. But there's a question most people don't ask. Does this actually make my monthly life easier? And the answer is, not really. You still have the same expenses. You still deal with everyday costs. In other words, you might be richer on paper, but not actually more comfortable in real life. And this creates a huge misunderstanding. You think you're building wealth well, but in reality, you haven't built strong enough cash flow for the future. Main idea 2. When income stops, weak systems get exposed. I've realized something that many people only see clearly when it's already too late. As long as you're still working, everything feels fine. Money keeps coming in every month. Even if you spend a little more than you should, you can still manage. If things get tight, you can work a bit more, cut back temporarily, or just figure it out next month. But here's the interesting part. That sense of stability doesn't come from your financial system. It comes from your income still flowing in. Most people don't realize that monthly income acts like a psychological cushion. It hides a lot of weaknesses. A simple example, you might be spending a bit more than you should. You might not be saving enough. You might not be investing properly, but because money keeps coming in, it doesn't feel risky. Everything still looks okay until that income slows down or stops completely. And then something happens very quickly. You start living off what you've already built. And this is when your real financial system gets revealed. If all you've done is accumulate assets without building cash flow, you'll feel a very real pressure. Money is going out, but nothing is coming back in. Every expense feels heavier. Every decision requires more thought. And what's interesting is that feeling doesn't come from being poor. It comes from not being in control of your money flow. Main idea 3. Wealth doesn't decline because you spend. It declines because you don't have a strategy. I've noticed a very common misunderstanding. When people think about losing wealth later in life, they usually assume it must be because they spend too much. But here's the interesting part. In many cases, people aren't overspending at all. They're just living a normal life. Eating, paying bills, taking care of their health, occasionally helping family. Nothing extravagant. So why does the money still go down? Most people don't realize that. The issue isn't how much you spend. It's how you withdraw your money. A simple example, you need money for this month. You open your account and take out exactly what you need. Next month, you do the same. And the month after that. It sounds reasonable, but if you look closely, this is a very reactive approach. There's no clear rule, no defined limit, no long-term strategy. It's simply, if I need it, I take it. And what's interesting is, this works perfectly in the short term. You always have money to use, but in the long term, it creates a serious problem. You have no idea how fast your money is disappearing. There's no boundary protecting your wealth, everything happens slowly until one day you look back and think, why is my money going down so fast? Not because of one big decision, but because of hundreds of small ones. Without a system. Main idea 4. A simple limit can completely change your financial trajectory. I've noticed something really interesting. A lot of people believe that to manage money well, you need complex strategies. You need to calculate everything carefully, track the market, pick the right opportunities. But here's the interesting part. Sometimes the biggest difference comes from something very simple, a clear limit on how you use your money. Most people don't realize that when you don't have a limit, you'll always tend to loosen things just a little. Spend a bit more this month, a bit more the next. Nothing feels too big. But over time, it creates a completely different path. A simple example, 2 people have the same amount of savings. The first person spends based on how they feel. They use whatever they think they need. The second person sets a clear limit. Even if they have more, they stay within that boundary. In the short term, their lives don't look very different. But after a few years, the gap starts to show. The first person feels their money slowly shrinking. The second person stays stable. And here's the interesting part. This limit isn't about forcing yourself to live poorly. It's about creating a safety boundary, a way of telling yourself, no matter what happens, I'm still protected. And once you have that boundary, financial decisions become much lighter. You don't have to overthink every expense. You don't constantly worry about going too far. You're simply operating within a system you've already designed. Main idea 5. Flexibility is what keeps you safe, not the number you have. I've realized something that very few people prepare for. When thinking about the future, most people focus on one question: how much money is enough? But here's the interesting part. That's not the most important question. Most people don't realize that the future isn't a straight line. It constantly changes. Expenses change, health changes, markets change, and even how you want to live changes. If you rely on a fixed number, you're putting yourself into a very rigid system. A simple example, you assume you'll need a certain amount each month, but then one year, costs go up, or unexpected expenses show up. If you can't adjust, pressure builds quickly. On the other hand, there are people who don't necessarily have more money, but feel much safer because they can. Cut back when needed, earn extra when opportunities come, or adjust their lifestyle flexibly. And what's interesting is, this flexibility creates a very large safety zone. It keeps you from depending on just one scenario. You don't need everything to go exactly as planned to be okay. You can adapt. And in finance, the ability to adapt is sometimes more valuable than the amount you have. Main idea 6. The problem isn't how much you have, it's how you run your money. After years of observing, I've seen something very clearly. 2 people can have almost the same amount of money, but completely different financial experiences. One feels constantly stressed. The other feels relatively calm. And what's interesting is that difference rarely comes from the number itself. It comes from how they manage their money. Most people don't realize that money isn't just something you store. It's a system. If that system isn't clear, things slowly become messy. You end up spending based on emotion, withdrawing based on need, and adjusting as you go. It sounds flexible, but in reality, it's a lack of control. On the other hand, people who maintain long-term stability usually have one simple thing in common. They don't make financial decisions every day. They design a system first. A simple example, they clearly know how much is enough to spend, what their safe limit is, when to pull back, and when they can relax a bit. Because of that, they don't have to think too much every time they use money. And what's interesting is, when you reduce the number of decisions you have to make, your quality of life actually improves. Less stress, fewer mistakes, and a much clearer sense of control. Conclusion: I've realized something very simple, but it completely changes how you see money. Wealth doesn't just keep growing forever. And it doesn't randomly disappear either. It reflects how you built your system from the start. If you only focus on earning money, you can go far for a while, but if you don't build a way to manage it, you'll eventually run into the same problems again, just at a larger scale. And here's the interesting part. You don't have to change everything at once. Just start with small things, set a clear limit, understand your cash flow, and build flexibility into your lifestyle. Over time, those small changes create a much stronger system. And once your system is strong enough, you don't just keep your money, you keep your peace of mind. If this video helped you see money more clearly in your own life, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.